The explosion took place in a closely surveilled zone next to the border crossing that is lined with crowded duty-free shops and guide buses. Recently, it has been relatively quiet. The attack was thought to be the work of the Ansar Beit al-Maqdis group, based in the Sinai with links to Al-Qaeda. It was a group of 32 Koreans who arrived in Israel after visiting the pyramids and the Sinai. They planned to come to Israel and then leave for Europe, or by the bridges to Jordan. This attack could send Egypt's tourism industry even further down. Red Sea resorts are traditionally favorites of Russian and Asian scuba diving enthusiasts.
The Ukrainian government has dropped criminal charges against over 200 anti-government demonstrators. This after protesters occupying government buildings agreed to evacuate the structures. And Italian President Giorgio Napolitano has asked the 39-year-old leader of the center-left Democratic Party to form a new government following the resignation of former Prime Minister Enrico Letta last week. For more on these stories and others, we go with this CFI report.
Ukraine announced that it would drop criminal charges against 234 anti-government demonstrators as part of an amnesty deal aimed at reducing tension between the government and opponents. Meanwhile, protesters agreed to vacate government buildings. Despite the conciliatory moves, however, the situation remains tense, with the opposition seeking to keep up pressure on President Yanukovych. Opposition leaders were to meet Monday with German Chancellor Angela Merkel to discuss Germany's support for Ukraine. Some 600 Syrian families arrived in Lebanon after fleeing the fighting in the Syrian town of Yabrud, the last rebel stronghold in the border region. The town has been severely bombed and shelled in a recent operation that raised fears of a major assault by ground troops. Meanwhile, the second round of peace talks in Geneva ended with little progress over the weekend. Italy's center-left leader Matteo Renzi has been asked to form a new government following the resignation of former Prime Minister Enrico Letta last week. The 39-year-old mayor of Florence had engineered the removal of his party rival Letta at a meeting of the Democratic Party leadership last week because of the slow pace of economic reforms. Renzi said he would begin to lay out a program of reforms to be completed within the next few months. Snowfall in the northwest of Saudi Arabia on Sunday drew locals and visitors to scenic mountain areas to enjoy the spectacle. Snowfall is a rare sight here, although it did occur last December.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has accused unnamed individuals of trying to create a political crisis with the ultimate aim of justifying a coup d'etat. Maduro's allegations come against the backdrop of street protests by students, which often end in violence. Details in the CFI report.
Displaying death threats against him published on Twitter, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has been discrediting the student demonstrations that have been going on for almost 2 weeks. He said the opposition wants to get rid of him, as with Hugo Chavez in 2002.
We are not dealing with an opposition, demonstrations, and students. No, this is about creating a political crisis to justify a coup d'etat through the use of violence.
The president strongly criticized student leader Leopoldo Lopez, wanted by the police. He stands accused of homicide after the demonstration on Wednesday, in which 3 people were killed and 60 others injured. But Lopez has announced another march for Tuesday.
I will be there and will be up front. I have nothing to fear. I have committed no crime. I am a Venezuelan devoted to his country, his people, to the Constitution and the future.
On Sunday, Venezuelan students once again took to the streets of Caracas, criticizing the incompetence of the government. They were protesting against the lack of security, one of the highest crime rates in the world, regular food shortages, and inflation at 56%. Opposition leader Enrique Capriles expressed his support for the wanted student leader. He said the government cannot stand any opposition.
For this government, If one person has a different position, or if the students have a different position, or if the country has a different position, that means that they're on the side of violence.
But Enrique Capriles does not entirely agree with the strategy of the students. He says conditions are not yet ripe to force Maduro to step down. These student demonstrations often end in clashes. The injured are both on the side of the students and the Chavez Maduro supporters.
It's now time for a second break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. And before we take leave of you, a quick reminder of the day's top stories. Gambians are preparing to mark the 49th anniversary of the lowering of the Union Jack and the hoisting of the red, white, blue, white, green. President Jammeh has relieved Mrs. Tenemba Jaite of her cabinet appointment as Minister of Energy. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has accused the opposition of fomenting trouble to make the case for an unconstitutional change of government. And a bomb blast on a bus carrying 33 tourists has claimed the lives of 3 South Korean nationals and a driver in the restive Egyptian Sinai region. That was all in this edition of the news. Thanks for the pleasure of your company. Do stay with us.